Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place where we really get into remarkable sources, pull out those profound truths, and basically give you the most impactful insights.
That's the goal.
And today, well, we're undertaking a deep dive into something truly huge, Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn's The Gulag Archipelago.
Monumental is the word.
It really is. Our mission, like always, is to cut through all this dense material, pull out the most important stuff, and honestly, some pretty shocking knowledge, basically giving you a shortcut to understanding the Soviet penal system and the lives it just consumed.
Yeah. And it's crucial to remember, this isn't just history. Solzhenitsyn saw it as a memorial. He dedicated it, and these are his words, to all those who did not live to tell it.
Wow.
He actually held back from publishing it for a while. He felt his duty to the living, outweighed his duty to the dead. But then the state security, the KGB, they seized the manuscript. And he felt he had no alternative but to publish it immediately, which you can imagine put him in immense personal danger, bringing these truths out.
Yeah.
It was incredibly risky.
It's just mind-boggling to think that when he started writing this back in, 1958?
That's right.
He said he knew of no memoirs nor works of literature dealing with the camps.
Mm-hmm. A total blackout.
A complete historical blackout. So, this deep dive, we're really going to try and shed light on how ordinary life just became this extraordinary, almost unthinkable hardship for so many.
And Solzhenitsyn's central image, the archipelago.
Yeah.
It's powerful. It wasn't a single place, right? It was this invisible, kind of pervasive network of prison islands all across the Soviet Union.
Invisible islands.
Yeah. And he warned that decades go by and the scars and sores of the past are healing over for good, that they could just disappear into the polar sea of oblivion.
No.
So the book was urgent, vital, really, to make sure we don't forget.
And right from the start, the sheer randomness of the arrests, it just jumps out at you, what they'd confiscate during searches.
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't logical.
Not at all. He mentions this antiquarian, the Chetverukhin. They took pages of Tsarist decrees, like ending the war with Napoleon, or players against cholera.
Stuff that had zero relevance to any supposed crime.
Exactly. Or, even more incredibly, those ancient Tibetan manuscripts. So valuable. And it took the scholars' students, what was it?
30 years. 30 years to wrest them from the KGB.
30 years. It just shows. It's not just illogic, is it? It feels like a deliberate strategy to destroy any sense of safety, make everyday life totally unpredictable.
Precisely. And the methods of arrest themselves, they're often about psychological manipulation.
Yeah.
Not always just brute force.
Right.
You had the terrifying night arrest, obviously, being torn from the warmth of his bed, half asleep, helpless. That's pure terror.
Of course.
But then there were these more deceptive ways designed to catch people off guard.
Some of those stories are just chillin', like the Hungarian woman Irma Mendel, arrested on a date after the Bolshoi Theater by her own interrogator.
I would go with that.
Yeah, or Navy Captain Burkovsky, arrested while buying a cake for a young lady, and then they sliced up the cake during the search. It's surreal.
It completely shatters any sense of normalcy. And it wasn't just isolated incidents. They had tricks, like the vacation ticket to a Sochi sanatorium routine.
How did that work?
Well, someone would be at the train station, right?
Yeah.
And this extraordinarily pleasant young man approaches them, maybe hails them by name. Turns out he's the arresting officer, holding a warrant, not a ticket.
Oh my God, just pure deception.
It showed there was absolutely no security. You couldn't trust anyone, anything. The psychological pressure must have been immense.
And can you imagine being the family left behind? Just waiting. Solzhenitsyn talks about 5 days of standing in crowded lines, just hoping for news.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get an answer like, deprived of the right to correspond, which everyone knew. It almost certainly meant.
Has been shot.
Yeah. The not knowing. That was torture, too.
And the system, well, it didn't really care who it took. It cast a very wide net. Right back in 1918, the first wave included hostages.
Hostages?
Meaning people not personally accused of anything. They were destroyed simply to terrorize or wreak vengeance. Solzhenitsyn gives this really stark example. He says it's just as if, after the attempt to assassinate the Tsar, not only his members, but all the students in Russia had been arrested. Just collective punishment on a massive scale.
Then after that, you had the torrent of socialist traitors starting around 1918.
Right. The SRs, Mensheviks, anarchists, groups who had been revolutionaries themselves.
But now they were enemies of the new state.
Exactly. The Bolsheviks were consolidating power. But contrast that with people like Vera Rybakova or Yekaterina Ulitskaya. genuinely committed socialists. They went to prison almost gladly with pride and happiness because they knew they'd find their comrades there.
Which tells you who the system was really after. Not necessarily just opponents, but anyone who didn't fit the exact mold.
And the net just kept getting wider. By 1919, these big halls of the intelligentsia, scientists, academics, artists, writers, engineers, anyone close to the cadets.
The cadets being the Constitutional Democratic Party. Liberals, basically.
Seen as a threat.
Yeah.
I mean, even Lenin himself called the famous writer Korolenko a pitiful petty bourgeois who deserved a few weeks in prison. It shows this deep ideological suspicion of any independent thought.
And beyond the sort of obvious political targets, there's this category Solzhenitsyn highlights that's, well, it's deeply unsettling. People arrested simply for refusing to become informers.
A refusal to participate.
Like Magdalena Edzubova, sentenced to be shot for telling her guardian she'd been pressured to inform. They called it revealing an operational secret.
Unbelievable.
Or Nadezhda Surovets, arrested just for refusing to spy on Ukrainian government figures. I mean, what kind of system punishes the refusal to betray someone? It demands complicity.
It speaks volumes. And then you have the term kulak. By 1930, it just got inflated beyond recognition.
It originally meant a wealthy peasant.
Right. But it came to mean any strong peasant. Strong in how they ran their farm, strong in their work ethic, maybe even strong in their convictions. Solzhenitsyn calls them the very best farmers, the ones who fed Russia in 1928.
And what happened to them?
Driven naked into the northern wastes. It was the systematic destruction of a whole social class, purely for ideology.
And it wasn't just these huge groups. He talks about small, changeless wavelets of arrests, like constantly trickling in.
Yeah. Who was in those?
Esperantists, well, people who spoke Esperanto, dissenting teachers, tribes from the North Caucasus, believers who refused to work on Sundays, priests who wouldn't violate confession, members of non-Orthodox sects.
So basically, anyone who didn't conform, any deviation from the state line in belief or practice.
It paints this picture of just total control over every little part of life.
And perhaps the most pervasive tool for all this was Article 58, Section 10, counter-revolutionary agitation. That was the charge used again and again. The most constant wave, he calls it.
How broad was that agitation?
Incredibly broad. An appeal. That could just be a private chat or a letter. Subverting any idea that didn't perfectly match the newspaper headlines that day. Even private diaries counted as literary materials. And here's the really twisted part. A starving prisoner, too weak to work, that could be prosecuted under 5810 as weakening of state power.
That's perverse. So once you were caught in this net, what happened next? Interrogation.
Ah, yes, interrogation.
Solzhenitsyn has that line, if Chekhov's characters had known what was coming.
Right, and not one of Chekhov's plays would have gotten to its end because all the heroes would have gone off to insane asylums.
It suggests a level of terror that's just hard for us to even imagine.
And the methods were designed to inflict that terror. They were specific, brutal, skulls squeezed in iron rings, acid baths, being tied up naked for ants and bed bugs to bite, a heated ramrod used internally as a secret brand, genitals crushed, and then the more, common tortures. Sleep deprivation for a week straight, thirst beatings to a bloody pulp.
It wasn't just random cruelty, though, was it? There was a purpose.
Absolutely. He says the creation of fabricated cases began back in the early years. So their constant salutary activity might be perceived as essential. They needed to justify their own existence, their own terror.
He gives that example from 1919, his supposed plot.
Oh, the one about dragging cannon onto an orphanage roof?
Yeah. To shell the Kremlin. It sounds completely insane.
It was fantastical.
Yeah.
But it was presented as a real conspiracy, justifying arrests and executions. It shows how far they'd go to create enemies.
And the interrogators themselves use these incredibly manipulative tactics.
Yes, beyond the physical torture, there were the psychological methods. Like that female interrogator undressing in front of an accused man just to cause extreme confusion.
Anything to break them.
Or they'd make prisoners forget conversations, deny they ever happened, then confront them with fake evidence from informants, trapping them.
And legally, you had no ground to stand on.
None whatsoever. Deprived of even a knowledge of the law. Solzhenitsyn recounts prisoners asking to see the indictment they were supposed to sign.
And the answer?
You are not supposed to see it. It isn't written for you, but for us.
Chilling. Despite the fact that Article 136 of their own criminal code technically forbade extracting testimony by compulsion and threats.
A rule that was just ignored, routinely. Which leads to that comparison he makes between the MGB, the Soviet Security Agency, and the Gestapo.
Right. How did he see them differing?
Well, he argues that while both were brutal, the Gestapo, horrifyingly, was often trying to get at the truth. If the charges didn't stick, they might actually release someone.
Okay.
But the MGB, they weren't interested in the truth. Once they arrested you, they had no intention of letting anyone out of its grip. The arrest itself was practically the conviction.
And so Solzhenitsyn felt this personally, didn't he? With his own writings.
Deeply. His war diary, notes for a novel, things he'd written as a soldier, used as evidence against him. He was forced to repent, to reject my political mistakes.
And his notebooks.
He describes them being cast into the hellish maw of the Lubyanka furnace. He calls it a red pyre of one more novel which had perished in Russia. Just heartbreaking. He saw another prisoner's confiscated writings as the burial mound of some interred human spirit.
The people carrying out these interrogations, the torture, the blue cats, the security guys. What was their mindset?
He explores that too. The pale night executioners. He suggests they knew cases were often fabricated. They weren't stupid.
So how did they keep doing it?
Either by forcing themselves not to think, just following orders blindly, or by genuinely convincing themselves that the orders, the party line, must always be right, regardless of the evidence. A kind of willful blindness or ideological fanaticism.
And the power they held. It must have been intoxicating.
Oh, definitely. Solzhenitsyn talks about the intoxication of it. Imagine, he says, some sniveling youth from nowhere becoming a feared special department officer, making professors tremble before him.
Or a mere lieutenant, a smarsh guy from counterintelligence.
Yeah, those guys are brutal.
Ordering around a portly old colonel. They literally controlled people's freedom, their lives, and their own names. The blue caps' names were like secrets. Like that of a jealously guarded deity cannot be spoken or written. Total impunity.
And that power could lead to absolute dehumanization. There was that horrifying rumor from the early days, 1918 to 1920, about the Petrograd Cheka.
The secret police, then? What was the rumor?
That they fed some of them alive to the animals in the city zoos.
Alive! My God.
And the supposed justification. How else could they get food for the zoos in those famine years? Whether it literally happened or not, the fact that such a story could even circulate shows how utterly disposable human life had become in the name of expediency.
It all leads back to that really profound point Solzhenitsyn makes about evil itself.
The famous passage, yeah?
If only it were all so simple. If only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them.
But it's not simple.
No. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being, and who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart. It puts the responsibility, the potential for this, inside all of us.
It's a challenge to any easy answers. But amidst all this darkness, Solzhenitsyn describes reaching the first cell after interrogation almost. Positively.
In a strange way, yes.
He calls it a place where the soul could heal, where you finally met people who were not your enemies, where you could use that joyous word we. After the isolation and terror, finding community even there, it was a relief.
And the first questions they'd ask each other. So basic.
Are you from freedom?
Yeah. And it's amazing how little news got in. He mentions prisoners in late February 1945 knowing nothing about the Yalta Conference or major war developments.
Total isolation from the outside world. Cut off completely.
Which makes the contrast he draws with Tsarist prisons really stark.
Political prisoners under the Tsar actually recalled those prisons with a feeling almost of gladness compared to the Soviet ones.
Gladness.
Relatively speaking. In Tsarist times, they could communicate by knocking codes on walls. They could even write and publish appeals from hard labor prisons.
Unbelievable. Compared
to Soviet prisons where even chess sets or books were suspect jailers, worried they'd be used to break walls or start fires. They even took prisoners' eyeglasses away at night.
Eyeglasses? Why?
Potentially dangerous.
Wow. He tells that little story about Susi, the Estonian lawyer.
Ah, yes, Susie. Golden-tongued.
Even though they took his horn-rimmed glasses every night, he still represented Europe worthily and with restraint in the cell, a small act of maintaining dignity.
Those small acts become huge in that context. Now, another massive group that ended up in the Gulag, especially after the war, were the Soviet POWs, prisoners of war.
Right. What happened to them when they came back?
Often, tragically, they were imprisoned for that very reason, for having been captured.
Why?
The twisted logic was, how could you have survived an annihilation camp? Something doesn't smell right. Survival itself was suspicious. Solzhenitsyn calls it the motherland's triple betrayal.
Triple.
First, the ineptitude that led to them being captured. Second, abandoning them while they were prisoners. And third, labeling them traitors when they finally came home.
That's brutal. And it ties into the sheer number of people labeled traitors in the Soviet system. He contrasts it with Britain during World War II.
Right. Millions of Soviet traitors. Capitalist England, during the same war, they found basically one traitor, Lord Haw-Haw.
So Solzhenitsyn asks that piercing question.
Might the heart of the matter not be in the political system?
Yeah. Suggesting the system itself created the conditions for mass perceived disloyalty.
And linked to that was Stalin's obsessive spy mania. It fueled mass arrests, mass exiles, Chinese people leaving the Soviet Union, Koreans, any Soviet citizen who'd lived abroad for any reason.
Even people who just look suspicious.
Even people who stared too long at railroad tracks. It was paranoia institutionalized. He quotes Catherine the Great's maxim, but applies it to Stalin. Better that 999 innocent men should rot than miss one genuine spy.
The human cost of that logic is staggering. Let's shift a bit to the law itself. How did it get so distorted, used as a weapon like this?
A key mechanism was the introduction of the troikas. These were panels of 3 officials.
3 people deciding fates.
Yes, and they bypassed the courts permanently. They combined everything. Investigation, arrest, interrogation, prosecution, trial, and execution of the verdict. All done by the same small group, outside any normal legal framework.
So justice wasn't even part of the equation?
Not in the way we understand it. There was this fundamental shift he identifies, away from judging personal guilt towards assessing social danger. Meaning, an innocent person could be locked up if he is socially hostile, if he belonged to the wrong class or held the wrong views, even if he hadn't done anything. And conversely, a guilty man might be let go if he is socially friendly, if he was useful to the regime. Law became purely political.
The scale of the killing, justified by this law, is just hard to comprehend. He compares the numbers again. Tsarist Russia versus the early Soviet states.
It's a shocking comparison. Tsarist Russia, over 80 years, 1826 to 1906, executed 894 people. Just terrible, of course.
Okay. And the Soviets?
In just 16 months, June 1918 to October 1919, in only 20 central provinces, they shot more than 16,000 persons.
16,000 in 16 months?
Over 1,000 a month. He calculates the terror was at least 3 times more intense than Stalinin's, which was already seen as a period of harsh Tsarist repression.
And this perversion of justice continued in those big show trials, right? Like the Prom Party and Shakti trials.
Exactly. These were engineers, technical experts accused of wrecking. Sabotage.
What kind of sabotage?
Absurd things. Planning for higher quality products, which would take longer. Making long-term investment plans instead of just meeting immediate quotas. Sometimes just failing to meet completely impossible production targets set by the state.
So competence or realism was seen as sabotage?
Effectively, yes. Many accused, like this engineer Chronicle, actually died during the course of his interrogation. And then they posthumously named him a leader of the Prom Party.
Died under interrogation and then named a leader. Wow. There's that figure Vasily Vlasov from another trial.
The Kadi trial, yeah. A district official sentenced to be shot.
And he called out the court.
He did. He called them actors pretending to be a court in a stage farce where roles have already been written for you. He saw right through it.
And the reaction in the courtroom when the death sentences were read?
Tellingly, no applause was to be heard even from the first 2 benches where the party members were sitting. Maybe even some of them felt it had gone too far. Or perhaps just stunned silence.
So after the trial came the journey, the transport to the camps, the slave caravans.
Yes, the journey itself was part of the punishment, part of the dehumanization. So Solzhenitsyn calls the transport vehicles the ships of the archipelago.
What kinds of ships?
The sealed railway cars, Zak cars or Stolypin cars, ironically named after the Tsarist minister. The Black Marias, those police vans. Barges on rivers. And just foot caravans, marching prisoners across vast distances, carrying these invisible slaves between the invisible islands.
And the conditions inside these transports.
Appalling. He describes packing 50, 70 prisoners into a single train compartment, meant for far fewer. Sometimes packed so tightly, the number was limited only by the number of unremoved corpses.
Corpses? They didn't remove them.
Not always immediately, no. Food could be just half a herring for the day, eaten out of your coat flap or just your hands. No utensils.
And basic needs like the toilet.
A combat operation, he calls it. Rushed, humiliating. Shouts, shoves. He mentions a one-legged German prisoner, Schultz, being forced to hop frantically while guards laughed.
Just relentless degradation.
And the system, deliberately created divisions among the prisoners, too. The political prisoners, the pseudo-politicals, as he sometimes calls them, were often crushed, afraid of any collective action.
Then who preyed on them?
The blatany. The professional criminals, the thieves, they were often given unofficial privileges by the guards. They'd openly call the political suckers and just take their food, their clothes. It stopped any solidarity from forming.
He paints that really sad picture of ordinary people watching prisoners being loaded onto the Black Marias.
Yeah, the free people on the street.
We stare at them quite freely and openly. But how are they supposed to look at us? Can they look with hatred? Their consciences don't permit it. With sympathy, pity.
Be careful. Someone will take down your name and they'll set you up for a prison term too. It's that simple. Fear kept people silent, complicit.
Only who dared to help.
Mostly old women, he says, or former camp inmates themselves. They might risk tossing a piece of bread or some cigarettes.
And the journeys in winter.
Unimaginably brutal. 40 degrees below zero. Guards refusing toilet breaks, so prisoners had to relieve themselves in their clothes, freezing instantly. Dogs set on anyone who stumbled or fell behind in the marching columns. Just utter indifference to suffering.
And did you even know where you were going? Was it organized?
Often chaotic. He describes prisoner files just being untied, scattered on office floors, mixed up, people sent to the wrong camps, sentences confused. It was arbitrary.
He even mentions someone selling their short sentence.
Yeah, this eccentric prisoner sold his remaining short term to another prisoner for a kilo or two of fat bacon, knowing full well it was illegal, and he'd probably get a much longer sentence when caught later. Just for a bit of food now. Desperation.
And that story about Eric, the British officer?
Oh, right. Captured by the Soviets. They offered him full and complete capitalist maintenance. Good food, conditions if he'd collaborate, spill secrets.
And he refused.
He refused. So what did they do? They surrounded him with books by Marx, Engels, Lenin, Stalin. Their idea was to re-educate him through ideology. Since bribery didn't work, it shows their absolute faith in doctrine over, well, anything else.
So we've journeyed through this horrifying world of the archipelago. We've seen how the system just crushed people, body and soul, how ideology was twisted to justify cruelty that's hard to fathom.
Overwhelming.
And yet, even in that abyss, he shows glimpses of the human spirit, adapting, resisting in small ways, connecting with others.
Absolutely. And Solzhenitsyn himself, having lived through it, offers this really profound challenge at the end. It's like a counter manifesto for how to live.
What does he say?
He says, do not pursue what is illusory property and possession. All that is gained at the expense of your nerves decade after decade, and is confiscated in one fell night.
Don't chase illusions.
Right. Instead, live with a steady superiority over life. Don't be afraid of misfortune, and do not yearn after happiness. It sounds stark, but he continues. It is enough if you don't freeze in the cold, and if thirst and hunger don't claw at your insides, if your back isn't broken, if your feet can walk, if both arms can bend, if both eyes see. It's about finding value in the absolute basics of existence and inner strength when everything external is stripped away.
So after hearing all this, what does it mean for you, listening now, given how pervasive systems can be, and as Solzhenitsyn says, that capacity for good and evil exists within every human heart? How do you protect your own integrity, your own civil valor when you face pressures, big or small pressures to just conform or look away or maybe even betray something important?
Yeah, that's the takeaway, isn't it? This deep dive into the Gulag Archipelago isn't just history. It really is a timeless mirror. It reflects back on human nature, on the choices we make under pressure, and it leaves you with that fundamental question. Stripped of everything else, your comfort, your freedom, maybe more, what choices would you make when all you have left is your spirit and your conscience?